The Edmonton Oilers move on, and the Toronto Maple Leafs forget to show up. Welcome to NHL Wraparound Stanley Cupdate for Thursday, May 15th, 2025. Vic and Neil joining you. What the hell was that in Toronto last night?
If you didn't know better, you'd need a construction crew, because as soon as Ekblad scored, the roof completely fell in. It was a fairly decent back and forth. And then Ekblad scores that first goal, and it's something like I've never seen before. It's hard to describe what it was other than just absolutely horrific for Leafs and their fans.
William Nylander had a breakaway early, and there were some good chances for Florida also. But as you said, after that shot went in by Ekblad, which was kind of a mindless turnover by Auston Matthews, everything went wrong for the Maple Leafs. But so much of it was self-inflicted wounds during the course of the evening. And we had said going in with an extra day off, who needed the day more? You looked at the health piece for the Panthers. I looked more at the reset for the Leafs after losing the 2 games down in Florida. Well, if this was a reset, that got short-circuited real quickly.
You know, you're right. I said for their physicality, Florida, it would do them good. You said more for the mental state of Toronto, it would do them good to reset mentally.
Yeah. And
last night looked like not only did they not reset mentally, they also got a lobotomy along the way.
Reminds me of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. With
That's
Jack
exactly
Nicholson.
where I got that term from.
Beautiful.
Chief, okay. And you have Chief behind the bench with the Maple Leafs, and you got Chief in the movie.
Where was Nurse Ratched in all of this?
I know. She was taking care of the wounded, I guess.
Well, the wounded continued in Toronto because realistically, even though Nylander had that great chance in the first period, and perhaps that would have been a key icebreaker for the Leafs, they did get out-attempted 32-12. And to a large degree, that first period had a lot of signatures of what we saw throughout the entirety of Game 4.
And what I was thinking as I'm watching that is you're not going to get the Nylander chance over again. I think there was a Nyes chance as well. And you're not getting those out-and-out great scoring opportunities, and then you don't score. I mean, you got your best player in Nylander, I think, on a breakaway, who scores at will all during the regular season and doesn't score on Bobrovsky. And to me, that was like a sign of, oh my God, what's going to happen here if he can't score on the breakaway and they're squeezing their sticks that tight. That's what I was thinking as I'm watching the game, not knowing that it's going to end up as a debacle of 6-1, and playing. By the time the buzzer went, they were playing in front of thousands of people dressed as empty seats.
What did they say? About a third of the crowd left the square that the fans gather outside. That had emptied out pretty quickly. First minute of the second period, Nylander and Laughlin both hit posts. And the real deflator seemed to come on that Kulikov shot that deflected in off Laughlin's stick and over Joseph Woll's shoulder. And from there, it was almost as if the Leafs knew they couldn't overcome a 2-goal deficit. 1 goal, you're 1 shot away. 2 goals, and this thing just went completely south at that point.
Yeah, completely. And then Woll was beaten where he could cleanly see the puck. Was that the Kulikov shot where he could clearly see it? Like there was a goal, was just a common slap shot and beat Woll.
That was the Mikkola goal, the fourth
goal. The Mikkola goal, sorry, not the Kulikov. The Mikkola goal. It was like old-time American Hockey League. Like, it was just a shot. It's a goalie and a shot. This is the NHL playoffs. He beat him clean without anybody in his way.
But by that time, the rout had begun because Mitch Marner with this spinorama backhand pass into the neutral zone out of his own end, it gets picked off. Sam Reinhart finds Jesper Boqvist, who replaced Evan Rodriguez on the top line, which was interesting because it was just a straight swap out by head coach Paul Maurice. Instead of moving Carter Verhaeghe back to the first line, he puts Boqvist in. He scores on the pass from Reinhart off the back post. Well, I mean, what a mess. I mean, Mitch Marner and all right, go ahead.
No. I was going to say there was the spinorama move, and it was not a Savardian spinorama, by the way. This was a Marner spinorama, and no look through the neutral zone, picked off by Florida. Reinhart down. Great pass to Boqvist, but guess who didn't catch Boqvist and was sticking his stick out? Marner. Again, and Marner's a fast guy. Like, I'm not saying he could have caught him and didn't. I'm just saying, like, he looked really bad in that one. I mean, that one looked so bad that no matter what he did all game, the only thing you remember is that.
Remember, he also had a soft back check earlier in the series.
Yeah. No,
on a play that Sam Bennett had emerged from a scrum. So let's talk about Marner, because here's a player that's an unrestricted free agent at the end of the season. And I know that there was commentary on ESPN during the course of the third period. You and I had actually spoken during the second intermission. So here's a guy that's going to command $13 million. He scores a little bit more than a point a game during the course of the regular season, a little bit below a point a game during the course of the playoffs. But I think as we have seen, he's not a guy that you can depend on to produce. And now there's been some soft spots in his defensive game as well. Is he riding his ticket out of Toronto?
Personally, I think he already wrote his ticket and put it in his drawer and was waiting for the season to end. But I'm here to tell you that I think you've seen Mitch Marner skate off of Scotiabank Arena ice as a member of the home team for the last time last night. I think Marner's gone. I think he's going to sign somewhere else. The Leafs are okay with that because it's been quiet, and he doesn't like it in his hometown. He thinks he's unfairly treated. So I think he's out of town. I don't think how he played last night was any indication of not giving a crap about it or, trying to get out or anything like that. I don't think it was any conspiracy theory there, but I do think that we've seen the last of Mitch Marner as a Toronto Maple Leaf.
We're not going to write the Leafs off yet. Still one game that Florida has to win in this, but let's fast forward a little bit, regardless of how these playoffs end. And perhaps Marner is able to reverse something that he has never been able to do in the playoffs before and become a big-time player in Game 6, maybe Game 7. And if the Leafs win the next two games, perhaps this narrative changes completely. But if you're a club out there looking to sign him during the offseason, you're still paying this guy $13 million when he's got a track record that when the going gets tough deeper in the playoffs, he's a no-show.
Yeah, that's if you're looking at having a Stanley Cup team. But if you're the New York Islanders, for an example, and you don't have any present and any future, you don't have anybody coming, you got a broken kneecap Barzell, and you've got an older Palmieri, and you've got a good Bo Horvat, and not much else. You're not really worried about what he's going to, of what you just said. You just need a star player on your team, and he's a star player. So what my argument is, and not my argument, but what my point is that there are tons of teams around the league that aren't even close to worrying about whether or not he's a no-show when it comes down to the, a Stanley Cup type of run.
Let's go back to the Panthers for a second, because, boy, they saw a wounded animal out there, even though they are an animal, and they pounced. They showed everything what a Stanley Cup champion is. They let the Leafs get undisciplined. Max Domi lost his mind during the course of a game a couple of times. I mean, there was that really long break in the third period. It was like sitting on a tarmac for 5 hours without air conditioning on the plane. It was awful at the end of that.
Yeah, it was. Everything was awful about this game. In fact, Vic, I gotta reflect back to the 90s and my days in New York and think of the worst days of sitting in the building and our team performing badly, and you just sit there and go, oh my God, this place is going to implode. Everybody's mad, and the feeling is just awful. And I was never running a Stanley Cup contender and got blown out in the playoffs like this. I've never seen this before. I've seen 6-1 playoff games, but they're usually the good team has, there's one good team and one bad team. Let's remember, Toronto ended in first place this year in the same division with the Panthers, while the Panthers ended third, and yet they're blown out at home 6-1 in a pivotal game.
So let's go back to 94 and the fifth game of the series against New Jersey that came back 2-2. You guys had a couple of good opportunities early, and then Bernie Nichols scored, and it was all downhill from there. The team was flat. You had to go on the road to win a sixth game to bring it back to Madison Square Garden for that epic Game 7. This is a similar situation for Toronto, that even though they didn't win the President's Trophy, they were a first-place team. They absolutely flatlined on Wednesday. And one of my favorite things about the playoffs is when a higher seed has to go on the road in a Game 6 to try to salvage their season. And I think the one big difference is you had Mark Messier. You had a guy that could will a team to win. Somebody's got to assume that role for Toronto on Friday. If not, now it's officially 58 years without a cup.
Yeah, the difference is that we had 6 guys that knew how to win the Stanley Cup. Leafs have a coach that knows how to win the Stanley Cup. Yes, we had Mess, by far our most important player, but we also had Glenn Anderson. We had Kevin Lowe. We had Asa Tikkanen. We had Adam Graves, Jeff Bukaboom. All these guys had won cups, and you weren't going to shake them. You weren't going to shake them that easy. And we didn't get beat 6-1. I mean, we got beat. We were flat and all the rest of it. But that flatness, and I don't want to talk 94, but that flatness came because of dipshit Keenan the game before benching all the players.
Yeah.
Right? And so that took the air out. Like everybody's walking around like a zombie going, what the hell's going on? So let's go back to modern days. I don't see Toronto rebounding from this. I just do not. I don't think they have the people in the room to do that. I think they might have one guy in there that I really respect that could lead them out of it, and that's John Tavares. And he's never won a Stanley Cup. I know that. But he's a quality veteran guy. They've also got number 67, Max Pacioretty, who's a veteran who could say some right things, was the captain of Montreal. Tavares was the captain of the Islanders. He was the captain of Toronto. He could say some things to maybe get them going. They've also got Ekman Larsson, who won the Cup last year. They've got Stolars, who's, I'm sure, with the team, even though he's not in the net. But they could say some things that could be meaningful. But this team is the core 4, which is fast becoming the core 5 when you add Nyes to that. And other than Tavares, I love Nylander, but he couldn't get it done last night. Matthews is obviously not getting it done, even though he took 6 shots last night. Marner, we've talked about his crappy play in last night. It's got to be one of those guys that stands up and takes the bull by the horns. Who's going to do it?
And they had a goalless streak of 143 minutes and 25 seconds before Robertson got a goal with $1.06 left. So the Leafs get one chance to salvage their season Friday at Florida, Game 6, 8 p.m. The late game, how do you lose amidst this discussion the fact that the Edmonton Oilers are the first team to the Final Four with a 1-0 overtime win over the Vegas Golden Knights. This was a very interesting game in terms of how little ice was available during the course of the evening. There were chances, as there's always going to be, but I didn't expect the tight checking game that we saw that resulted in over 67 minutes of scoreless hockey.
No, I didn't expect to see that either. I think we've seen high-scoring games with these two clubs, and we've also seen Edmonton in high-scoring games with the LA Kings in the first round. But this was more of a Roger Neilson versus Jacques Lemaire.
Yeah.
Roger Neilson's most favorite score at the end of 60 minutes, 0-0. And that's what this was. Both goalies got a shutout in regulation.
Well, they would have regular season. Over 60 minutes. Stuart Skinner, second straight whitewash.
Yeah.
And Adin Hill was terrific also. And we should note that Mark Stone did not play in this game as a result of maybe a hit to the head in running into Corey Perry's knee while he was down on the ice. It wasn't a dirty hit or anything like that. It was just a happenstance play. But nonetheless, he was out of the lineup. But what impressed me about Vegas, considering how fast and how hard the Oilers came out in Game 4, they were not going to allow the same thing to happen in the fifth game.
Exactly. Vegas put up the good fight. At the end of the day, we've seen this movie with the Edmonton Oilers last year.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where they end in the standings. They are who they are. And once this thing gets rolling, watch out. And the thing that they've really gotten rolling is both goalies for them. Stuart Skinner, who played the last two shutouts, and before that, Kelvin Pickard. They've come through big time. I mean, as much as we've talked all season about Edmonton not having the goaltending, all of a sudden they got the goaltending. It's like Freddie Anderson 2.0.
But who would have thought after the first two games of the LA series that Skinner would do a complete 180 here with his work in the net? And I think this is also supported by the fact that, let's go back to our discussion with Jack Michaels earlier in the year when the Oilers were having all sorts of problems playing away from the puck. Their defending was horrible. But he believed in this team. Now, you could say part of it is, well, there's a little homerism in there because he's the play-by-play guy for the Oilers. But to their credit, Chris Knobloch's group was so good defensively last night. And again, yes, Vegas had shots. They had chances, but you're going to get that over the course of 67 minutes. I thought their gap control, I thought their back checking, I thought just the complete responsibility to their own end of the rink last night was exactly what we saw that helped get them to the finals last year.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm trying to say. And you said it better than I did, but
that's not possible.
we saw exactly the same movie as last year. I think it's going to be a hell of a series, whoever Edmonton gets in the next round. I'm assuming myself that it's going to be Dallas because I just think that's what it's going to be. But that's going to be a great series. However, Dallas has some more work to do before they can get there. Edmonton has done their work. Edmonton has moved on with that game last night with a 1-0 game. Edmonton proves to everybody they can win 7-6 and they can win 1-0.
I thought early in the third period, both teams had very good chances to score. Brett Howden, far post, just missed, had the puck tipped away from him. Leon Draisaitl had two really good chances, including a breakaway. And then I felt Vegas actually got better in this game as it progressed. I thought Jack Eichel was as visible as we had seen him in the entire series. Skinner had to make a big save on Pavel Dorofeyev late. And then with a $1.06 left, Hill on Connor McDavid on a 2-on-1 makes a save. But once it got to the overtime, I really thought that the Oilers had more jump, that they wanted to get this series put away, and Vegas was somewhat holding on.
I think you saw the lack of confidence in the Knights without their captain in the lineup, and I think you saw a tremendously confident Edmonton team in the overtime. That's what I think was going on there.
And what a great story for the overtime goal scorer, Kasperi Kapanen, who was claimed off waivers by the Oilers from St. Louis on November 19th. He was put into the lineup for the first time in the playoffs in Game 4 of this series. He gets a tap-in off a scramble. He had 8 hits in 2 games, so there was a lot of pent-up energy there. And here we go again. Secondary scoring. No Draisaitl, even though we got an assist on that game-winning goal. No McDavid. No Hyman, no problem. Oilers move on.
Yeah. Watch out, everybody, because the Oilers are, I guess they're oiled up now.
I guess they are. Let's put a wrap on the Golden Knights season because their big guns were far too sporadic in this series. Eichel, Hertl, Carlson, Dorofeev, Stone, who didn't play. Stone led the team with 4 goals during the course of the playoffs, and this team played 11 postseason games. So some of their offensive shortcomings certainly came to light during this series. To their credit, last night, they did not try to get in a track meet with the Oilers, but nonetheless, couldn't put anything on the board in 60 minutes, and now they go home for the summer.
And again, that was at home. And much as Toronto was at home embarrassing themselves in Canada, this was not an embarrassment with Vegas, nowhere near it. They put up the good fight, but it was a home game. And you expect that your players are going to play as hard as they possibly can in a home game. I'm not saying Vegas didn't. They did play hard. But again, you lose on home ice. It's never a good way to send the fans home, is watching your team lose. You'd rather lose that clincher on the road and win your home game than lose at home. But nevertheless, not a bad showing for Vegas. 1-0 is nothing to be depressed about, unlike the aforementioned Toronto Maple Leafs.
And we must remember that I get at least a little bit of revenge out of the Bubble Lock Challenge. Picking the Oilers last night, you had the 2 home teams.
I did have the 2 home teams, and I admit to that readily, that I said that Toronto would win because they had to win. I need a mulligan on that one. And I said that Vegas would win. However, you know what? I'm not going to be ashamed of my pick at 1-0 in overtime.
No, you shouldn't.
Could have gone either way. I am hanging my head in shame over picking Toronto last night, though. I feel shame.
Well, I have so little to hang my hat on. My bar has been set so low with that challenge during the course of the regular season, so thought it was worthwhile to bring up there. But you have a chance to redeem yourself with the Thursday games, both on TNT. Carolina Hurricanes have the opportunity to close out the Washington Capitals at 7 o'clock. Washington better bring a hell of a lot more to the table than what we saw in the 2 games down in Raleigh. If not, this is going to be over. And one of the more fascinating aspects about watching playoff hockey is when teams go down, some of them fight right to the end, and others appear to have their will broken. And in the 2 games in North Carolina, that's like somewhat what we saw with Washington, that they don't have an answer.
I don't think they do. And I think the answer could have come from bad goaltending from Carolina, but we're not getting that. We're getting good goaltending. And when you put good goaltending with machine gunning shots that Carolina brings, I don't think Washington has an answer for it. I really don't. I don't know that Washington's going to be able to beat Carolina even at home. But we will see. Maybe what I should do for Washington Caps and our friends there, like Craig Laughlin and so on, I should say that Carolina is going to win, because that probably will give Washington the win.
I don't think your arm needs twisting on this. I think you're going to say that they're going to win anyway. But at the start of the game, you're going to expect that Washington is going to give their best push of the series. And we always talk about these first 10 minutes, and the visiting team has to get through that. But as we've seen in a couple of instances during the course of the playoffs, road teams have taken the play to the home team in the first 10 minutes. And I would expect Rod Brind'Amour is going to want to be forceful and bring the exact same game that they have shown through 4 contests so far and bring it right to Washington early.
I would think so. But I think they're the more confident group in talking about the mental game that goes on. I think they're the more confident group, the Carolina Hurricanes. I still maintain that Washington has not been the same team since Ovi got right down to almost catching Gretzky and then did catch him. I don't think they've been able to get their game back that we saw in February and January and December.
So what you're saying is that as part of our analysis going through the playoffs, there was a belief that the Montreal series was kind of the right tonic to get their game back on the rails. Is this just the case where this is just not a good matchup for them against Carolina in a longer series?
I think it's not a good matchup, and I think that what happened was that Carolina, who during the regular season sometimes slipped because they didn't get the goaltending, because remember, you had an injuries to Anderson, you had in and out of the lineup, you had Kochetkov not in the net a lot of the games during the regular season. So I think that you've gotten a more full team in Carolina playing well all over the ice, including in the net. And I think that Washington doesn't have an answer for that.
7:00 once again on TNT. The later game being played at 9:30. Dallas and Winnipeg with the Stars holding a 3-1 lead. What do we see here?
The Stars holding a 3-1 lead, and I think that the Stars will be hard-pressed to win this game. I think Winnipeg, the President's Trophy team, the team that we watched all season, Hellebuck plays well in Winnipeg, although we could argue he hasn't played well on the road. It's at home, and I think they will skate off the ice with a victory tonight and go back to Dallas, but I don't think they win in Dallas.
It was a hat trick for Mikael Granlund in Game 4. I don't think Winnipeg played badly down in Dallas, but the bottom line is they still haven't found a way to win a road game. They're coming back home. I believe that they will give their best showing of the series to date because this is a good team. They do need some of their depth players to come through offensively. I think there's far too much dependence on Kyle Connor, Mark Scheifele, Nikolai Ehlers, Gabe Vilardi. They need second and third line scoring the same way Dallas has gotten in this series.
Yep, I absolutely agree with you. And they've got to equalize the monster of Mikko Rantanen, who's just been incredible. He's going to win the Conn Smythe Trophy if they win the Cup. I'm telling you that right now. Mm-hmm. That if Dallas Stars win the Stanley Cup, Mikko Rantanen will win the Conn Smythe Trophy. Already, I can tell you that. But anyway, I'm really looking forward to that game. That's going to be a good one.
Some news from around the NHL, and a lot of it is front office stuff and behind the bench stuff. Rick Tocchet named as the new head coach of the Flyers, replacing Brad Shaw, who replaced John Tortorella. He coached the past 2.5 seasons with the Canucks. This is his fourth head coaching gig, having previously been in Vancouver, obviously, Tampa Bay, and Arizona. He also spent 11 of his 18 seasons as a player with the Flyers over 2 stints. I think this is where the Flyers wanted to land in their search all along. However, truth be told, they're still not in a great cap situation for another year. And so this hire of Rick Tocchet is going to be assuming a lot of the same roster that John Tortorella had to work with this past season.
This is going to be no easy gig for Rick Tocchet and his coaching staff. Philadelphia is a long way away from having rebuilt the program. And although I'm sure the fans love it that their Rick Tocchet is back in a Flyers sweatsuit, he's going to have a lot of work to be done, and his coaching abilities will come out. We'll see. Is he a good coach with this kind of a team or not? We found out that Tortorella was a good coach with this kind of team. He expired, like everybody expires at some point as the coach, but this will really test Rick Tocchet in a whole different way than he's been tested before.
Do you like the fit?
Because he played for the Flyers, yeah. Other than that, no.
Stay tuned. Because his replacement, after Tocchet had advised the Canucks on April 29th that he would not be returning, Adam Foote gets his first ever head coaching gig. He had been Tocchet's assistant in Vancouver. And it was also believed that he was the preferred candidate by Captain Quinn Hughes. Does the captain have that much say with the front office in terms of who the next head coach is going to be?
And they didn't in my day, but they might today. I don't know. And it all depends on how, dare I say, that organization is run. I can't figure that out, how that organization is being run because of the things that have gone on there this year. But I'm glad for Adam Foote. He must be worried about his son, and I don't want to go too far into this, but his son is going through that trial now in London, Ontario, having been part of that of the accused. That must weigh heavy on a father, that his son's hockey career is pretty much done, and now he's being accused of something really bad up in Canada. So good for Adam Foote that he gets an opportunity.
Made official, something we reported on, Ken Holland, the Kings' new GM, and the New York Islanders have now completed their first wave of GM interviews. Evidently, there are people that they want to speak with the remaining teams in the playoffs, so we may get a decision that week. Hey, Scott Malkin, John Ledecky, look no further than the man on the screen, even though this is an audio show. What are you doing?
Yeah, you should be thought of as a candidate, Vic.
Yeah.
You're on the screen.
That's not who I'm talking about. And now with a sounding of the horns.
This day in Stanley Cup history, May 15th.
Usually we go way back in time to get a lot of the items that we use on this segment. But here, we're going to go to 2022. It's only 3 years ago, only the second time in Stanley Cup history that 2 Game 7 overtimes took place. The other was in 1997. The New York Rangers, Artemi Panarin scores at .446 on a power play to complete the Rangers' comeback against the Pittsburgh Penguins. And then later that night, the late Johnny Gaudreau, on a sharp angle off an Elias Lindholm rebound, scores his biggest goal as a Calgary Flame.
And Jake Ottinger got 64 saves in that game for the Stars. Johnny Gaudreau, we can't say enough things about him, can we? I mean, we just can't. But that's your day in Stanley Cup history.
Yeah, and that was also, in some ways, the coming out party for Jake Ottinger, too.
Yeah, yes, you're right. That's when we found out. Hey, they got a pretty good goalie.
That'll wrap up our show for today. Please remember to subscribe and like us on Facebook. Neil and I will return on Friday to recap Carolina-Washington, Dallas-Winnipeg, Game 5. Take care.